Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Internet's Mom and Dad.
The Internet's Mom and Dad, the world's most educational podcast.
Wow. We're really going to level up.
Yeah, I know. That's far from the truth. But
I'm Annie Warren.
I'm Jay Warren.
If you are new, we just wanted to give you a quick rundown. We're a married couple.
Still married.
Been married 5 years.
What?
I am white.
I am black.
And we have 2 gorgeous baby boys. And let's see. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, honestly, that's pretty much it.
Except for that you're a musician. That's pretty cool.
Yo, I just got verified on Instagram this week. What?
Is that your first social platform that you've been verified on? Are you verified on any others?
I don't know if Google counts, but I had to send them my driver's license to verify that it was me, because I got a what is it called? A Google Knowledge Panel. So I don't know if that one really counts, but this is the first one that feels yo, they're respecting the hustle.
Yeah, they are.
Feels good.
Yeah, Google would respect the hustle, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Second thing we just wanted to mention before we roll into our topic for the day is thank you to any new listeners. Thank you to those of you who have shared our podcast, who are recently tuning in. We have received a lot of love and support this week. I know that last week was a difficult one for us to record.
Yeah.
But we really went with our gut on that one, and it turned out to be the right thing. So I'm really glad that we went that way. And ultimately, we don't care about the number of followers or the number of streams. If we can get through to one person, that is an impact for us. And we are just trying to educate one another so that we can understand each other better and love each other better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the goal of, this week's protests are to end racism and police brutality. And we're not, nearsighted and thinking that, losing followers or people aren't going to want to hear about this anymore or da-da-da-da-da. None of that is really important. At the end of the day, the goal is ending racism and police brutality. We obviously have a long way to go, but these conversations are what will get us there.
Yeah, and I think one wonderful thing to note, we have been speaking about race here and there since we've been married. Your whole life, to everyone that you've met or has questions.
Yeah, I've been black my whole life.
Exactly. And I have been speaking more to it since we've gotten married. And this was the first time that I personally received any response, honestly. And the amount of response, especially from my white friends and my white family members, it just showed me that despite so much negativity and so much true colors showing and just feeling bad about that, it's left me pretty hopeful, actually, and hopeful that people who have never really looked or thought twice about it are becoming introspective. Is that the word?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And figuring
really holding
out
up a mirror to the issue.
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, I think that that's a wonderful thing that we can look on and say, yeah, we're not there yet, but we are making progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So the topic for today is essentially, I want to give Jay the opportunity to speak.
Yo.
He's never not talking, honestly, but...
Very good point. I'm always talking. There's never a moment that I'm not talking. Even if I'm silent, trust me, inside my head, I'm saying something.
Inside his head, he's interviewing himself.
That happens more
daily.
than you would think.
Probably daily.
I saw a tweet that was I have too many tabs open in my brain, and nothing has ever been truer.
Nothing. Exactly. So...
Nothing.
This is right in his repertoire. Is that how you say that word?
Who knows? Yeah. Repertoire. Whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah.
We're not French. This is right up his alley. So essentially, I just wanted to give him the platform this week. I'm going to be asking questions that I think a lot of people who are trying to understand everything that's going on have, and maybe they are, too nervous to ask their friends or their friends of color, or maybe they are simply just, being ignorant. And if they had this understanding, they would be more well informed. So I'm going to ask the questions, seeing as I've had a lot of them myself in the past, and Jay is going to provide the answers. So let's rock and roll.
Yeah. I'll preface by saying that obviously all of these answers are my own thoughts, experiences, opinions, and whatnot. I can't and shouldn't and wouldn't speak for all Black people or the entire Black Lives Matter movement or anyone other than myself. So you'll find conflicting opinions everywhere in life. And on an issue as complex as this, you certainly will find those. So yeah, just know that, these are my opinions, and hopefully they're helpful for you.
Yeah. And not that I need that same disclaimer, but if I do, I am not speaking on behalf of all white people either. Only my experiences. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Question number 1. Well, statement number 1.
Sure.
I think saying Black Lives Matter excludes other people. All lives matter is a better phrase that includes everyone.
Good one. Yeah, this is, easily like top 5, one of the most common questions that I've been getting asked over the last few days. And it's actually a pretty simple response or answer to that question statement, if you will. Black Lives Matter was or is a movement that was started after the death of Trayvon Martin. So it was a movement that was started after the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer, whose name I do not say, but after he was acquitted of murder, the Black Lives Matter movement started as a way of highlighting Black deaths at the hands of white people that were not held accountable for them. Following the Trayvon Martin case, many other cases, especially Black people being killed by white officers or officers, and then those officers not being held accountable for those deaths. So the movement started, like I said, after the Trayvon Martin case, and then as a means of trying to bring awareness and change to racism, and then specifically police brutality. So the All Lives Matter movement, first of all, isn't a movement. I don't believe that All Lives Matter has a website or a means of donating to a certain cause. Check that. See if there's an All Lives Matter website.
They have a Wikipedia page.
They have a Wikipedia page. Is there a website listed?
No, there's not.
Okay. So All Lives Matter is not a movement. It's just something people say to disagree with Black Lives Matter. So Black Lives Matter is saying, hey, Black people are being killed by police, and those police are not being held accountable for those deaths. Please help. And for some reason, people feel it necessary to say, well, all lives matter, and I am not going to offer any help in your cause.
Yeah. To me, that sounds like a response a toddler would say.
Right. I mean, it's the equivalent of like...
Yeah, give us a good analogy, because I think a good analogy explaining All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter has really made it click in my brain.
Sure. I have 2 analogies that I like. One is if you and I are in the room talking and I'm telling you about this organization that helps breast cancer, right? And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm running this 10K for breast cancer awareness, and we're raising money to find a cure for breast cancer. And if your response to me was, well, all cancer
snap.
should be you should be running for all cancer, not breast cancer. It's like, well, sure, of course. Yes, all cancer patients should have a cure. This race that I'm running is for breast cancer specifically. I don't understand why you have a problem with that. Nowhere am I saying that colon cancer, get over it. No, I'm saying that I'm running for breast cancer awareness.
And nowhere are you saying breast cancer is more difficult than colon cancer.
No, or lung cancer or liver cancer, any cancer. No, I'm saying I'm running a race to raise money for breast cancer. That's it. So that's one that I think people can grasp. The other is for the Christians in the room, which would be, and I shared this graphic on social media, and it is, there's a sheep hanging on one edge of the cliff, and he's hanging off, and there are sheep on the other side, safe, and they're holding up these picket signs that say all sheep matter, and there's a shepherd walking over to help the one sheep that's hanging off the side of the cliff. And my caption was, sometimes you have to leave the 99 in order to save the one. All lives matter is not helping the one. And again, for the Christians in the room, that will ring very familiar, and I think that's a very clear analogy as to Black Lives Matter just means Black Lives Matter also.
Yeah.
Please help, not we don't think anyone else's life matters.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of it like that, when you think of it like a cry for help, it's like, why would you be like, no, I need help too, and therefore I can't help you. I like those analogies. Tell me what you think of this one. We're all sitting down to eat, and we all get a plate of food, except Bob. Bob doesn't get a plate of food, and Bob's like, hey guys, like I'm pretty hungry. I'd like some food. I'm hungry as well. And Karen's like, we're all hungry, Bob. And Bob's like, I mean, I know. That's why we're all eating together. But I didn't get any food. And she's like, well, does that mean I don't deserve food? Because I'm hungry and I think I deserve food. And Bob's like, no, I think we all deserve food. But I just happen to not have any at this time. And Karen's like, well, no, we all deserve food and we're all hungry.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, very, very similar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very direct.
The only thing I would add to that is that you have to realize eventually, like, Bob's going to ask, like, he's going to start pretty peacefully, like, hey guys, like, is there a plate missing? Or like, hey, why don't I have a plate? Hey, excuse me, can I get a plate? Da-da-da-da-da. And eventually people are going to tell him over and over and over again, like, Bob, we are all hungry. Like,
yeah, but at this point, he's starving.
Right. And then eventually Bob is going to get so angry that he's going to flip the table over.
Yeah.
And that's where we are, is that the country has ignored, quote unquote, Bob's requests for food until the point where Bob's now extremely angry and he's flipping the table over and he's angry at everybody sitting at the table who has food.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. Well said. Okay, next question. Why do Black Lives Matter supporters call out white people so much? I'm not a cop. I've never killed a black person.
Oh, yeah. Good one. This one is actually quite simple. So, like I said, the point of Black Lives Matter is to try to end racism and police brutality in America, or reduce it as much as possible. I mean, I think we all know we're not going to be perfect at that. However, we have a long way to go. So the point is, let's end or reduce racism and police brutality, racism in police enforcement, in order to do that, there are certain policy changes that need to happen. So in order to have a policy changed, there need to be policymakers who make that issue a priority. And in America, we have the majority of the country versus, well, not versus, but we have the majority of the country, which represents the large slice of the pie, and the minority of the country, which represents the small part. Obviously, minorities are black, brown people who aren't white. The majority of the country is white. So if you are an elected official who wants to stay reelected, it is in your best interest to focus on the issues that affect the majority of voters. You want to stay reelected, or you want to stay elected. So I'll say that again. You pay attention to the issues that affect the majority of voters. The majority of voters in America are white. So black issues are a minority issue, therefore not high priority to someone who wants to stay reelected. The math just doesn't make sense. So in order for policy changes to occur concerning a black issue, we need majority of the voters, or white America, to prioritize the issue. So if white America isn't concerned about something, policymakers are not concerned about that thing because it doesn't threaten whether or not they stay reelected and whether or not the majority of people think they're a good political leader. So yes, Black Lives Matter targets white people to act or to do something, or gets frustrated at white people because genuinely we don't have the numbers to create change. We don't have enough voting members of society to create change, and we need white people to bring their voting power to the table.
Yeah, I like that explanation. Okay, next question. I can't support the Black Lives Matter movement because I'm against looting and rioting. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's another question that I definitely get a lot. Okay, so no one is asking you to loot or riot. What I am asking, or what we are asking, is that you take action in helping reduce police brutality and racism in America. If you don't like someone else's form of protest, you absolutely do not have to take part in that form of protest. However, as a citizen who is against police brutality and racism, it is expected that you protest in some form that you are comfortable with. That can be writing to your local and state policymakers. That can be donating to a cause or an organization or a charity that is fighting police brutality. That can be wearing a t-shirt or a sticker, publicly displaying a poster that shows your disapproval of police brutality or racism. No one is saying that you have to protest or riot. Now, if even that isn't a good enough answer for someone, I think that we have to visit kind of our country's history with riots and protests, in that from the very beginning, from the very inception of the United States of America, is founded in riots and protests. So the colonies were very upset with Great Britain over taxing them without representation in Parliament, and those taxes were over Great Britain financing helping to finance the French and Indian War, and then being expected to be repaid. So they imposed these taxes on imports and teas, the large thing being teas that we were all taught in elementary school. So eventually the colonies are fed up with being taxed these really high taxes for tea and imports. And so the Sons of Liberty, founded by Samuel Adams in Boston, say, enough is enough. When these tea boats, when these tea shipments come in, we're going to storm the ships, steal the tea, dump it overboard. And then the part that we don't necessarily talk about in school is tarring and feathering the Boston Commissioner of Customs, John Malcolm, and pouring hot tea down his throat, all as a means of sending a message to Great Britain. Fortunately, we are not at the point of tarring and feathering police officers and pouring hot tea down their throat. But if we look to history, that's where things will go next if the country doesn't open its eyes to this issue. So anyway, the country is started on the idea that if I don't like something, I'm going to steal and then perform destruction of private property. Right? That's what. Let's be very clear in that is exactly what the Boston Tea Party was: theft and destruction of private property. We could go through the Civil War and how that teaches us that these movements aren't always going to be so clear during the time that they're happening. A lot of people will ask, like, well, why isn't there a clear directive as to what people are trying to accomplish? It's like, well, during the moment, that can be hard to see. During the Civil War, it was unclear whether the war was over states' rights, as the South would have us believe, or whether it was over the emancipation of slaves, which is what the North would have us believe. So, I mean, we can look to the American Revolution, we can look to the to the Civil War. We can also look to the Civil Rights Movement as another example of riots and protesting, unfortunately, being the last measure or the last available form of protest, which then get the civil rights movement or the civil rights enacted into law. It wasn't until 4 months after they assassinated Martin Luther King that the civil rights movement was signed into law. And that was 4 months of riots, protesting, looting, burning down buildings. Gosh. Yeah, we often romanticize the idea of Martin Luther King and his peaceful protest. Keep in mind, his peaceful protest got him assassinated. Like, they got him killed.
I do want to ask a little bit, like, on that line of, I've heard a lot of people posting quotes from Martin Luther King about peaceful protesting, which, first of all, I think is like you're cherry picking your quotes.
Absolutely, because they
from
never.
Him
They don't include
specifically. Yeah,
they don't include the rioting is the language of the unheard quote.
Yes, and also I think it's just such a like Band-Aid for people to just post a Martin Luther King quote about not rioting.
Right.
I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me.
Well, it doesn't sit right because it's not helpful. It's not. Sure, yes. Ideally, people shouldn't have to riot. Like, we shouldn't get to that point. But eventually, after your mom asks you over and over and over and over again to clean your room, and then you don't do it, she's gonna blow up at you.
Oh, I've been there.
Right? We have a 3-year-old that, you can only ask so many times before you have to, like, oh my gosh, I may strangle my toddler, right? That's the feeling, but multiplied by the entire population of Black people in America.
Right.
So, yes, ideally, we should not have to riot. Things should not have to get violent. But when we try peaceful protests, case in point, Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem, and are met with, hey, we don't like that form of protest, or LeBron James speaking out on police brutality, hey, you're a basketball player, just play basketball. Eventually, things are going to get ugly because you've only been told over and over and over again that your peaceful protest means nothing to us.
Yeah, and to stay in your lane, which is a whole nother level of disrespect.
Absolutely. So I think we would be remiss to, keep up the fantasy that peaceful protest is what got the civil rights movement to happen. It started peaceful. People have been posting the image of Martin Luther King and the march to Selma. They're not posting what happened 12 minutes after that, with the riot dogs and them being gassed and hosed down and all that kind of stuff. But our country is steeped in, unfortunately, violent protests being the thing that wakes the country up. It's extremely unfortunate.
It is extremely unfortunate, and I think it's such a shame that we had to get to this point before enough people cared.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was talking to one of our other friends the other day about it, and she was like, look, this was her point of view, her words. I am not a big fan of rioting and looting. I see the perspective of like a small business owner who maybe got their business, like their window smashed in or whatever.
Yeah, that sucks.
It sucks, but she said, but guess who's finally paying attention, and guess who's finally uncomfortable? White people.
And that's what it takes for things to move, is we need action from white people.
Exactly. And never mind. I won't even go there, but I agree. So thank you for clarifying on that. Yeah, I think that those things you can be and think independently of rioting and looting and action. What do you need to do to create action that you are comfortable with? But don't just sit and criticize how somebody is doing it.
Right. Yeah. And again, I say all of that to say no one is expecting you or asking you to go out and riot or even to go out and protest. But it is expected that if you are against police brutality and racism, that you see now, and if you now see that there is a problem with that in this country, that you take action.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question. I have had a lot of people, I think we both have had a lot of people say, I don't really know how to ask my Black friends. I don't really know how to talk about it. I don't want to speak I don't want to speak because I'm worried I'm going to say something wrong. And this was me before we got married. I had a few Black friends, but I didn't want to offend anyone, and race can be so touchy. And then I married you, and you're like an open book. You're not offended by any question that comes from a good place. How do you recommend people talk to their Black friends? Like, how can we bridge this gap? Not in a way of like, go get all your answers from your Black friends, but more like, how can we as white people reach out to our Black friends to gain a good understanding and to hear them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a few layers to that. The first layer being just reaching out.
Yeah.
And just expressing your love and, honestly, like, it sounds cliche, but like your condolences. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the messages that I'm getting, which I'm very grateful for, are eye-opening for me, are my white friends reaching out and saying, hey, I love you, I support you, I stand with you. I didn't realize that this was such an issue. Mm-hmm. Which I can as things are happening, I can now believe that, like, you know what, like, white people just didn't, perhaps, even now, like, I struggle to say that because in my mind, it's like, it's so apparent. Like, it's hard for me to believe that, like, my friends just didn't know that these things were going on.
Yeah.
But as they're reaching out and, I feel like it's coming from a genuine place, like I'm slowly coming to terms with the fact that I think a lot of white people just didn't know that these things were still happening.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know.
Right. And because you're my wife, like I believe you, that my first thought is like, wow, that's crazy that like you didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, white girl from Utah, born and raised, went to school here from elementary to college, and had over the years, 2 handfuls of black friends, maybe.
Did you have any black teachers?
I don't think I have ever had a black teacher.
Just a question that I saw on Twitter.
Like in anything, in school, in dance.
Yeah. Any extracurriculars?
I had a black young women's leader at one point in my life, black church leader, but that's it.
Yeah. See, and then when you say that to me and explain, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I guess like it would make sense that like you just wouldn't know that.
Yeah. And I really genuinely thought that racism wasn't a thing anymore.
Right.
And nobody was feeding me that. Like, I see so many people get defensive. Racism isn't a thing. And it seems that they're being taught that from a parent or somewhere. I just didn't see it around me. And I knew in my heart and soul, in my bones, that it was wrong. And if I knew it was wrong, and that means everyone should know it's wrong, as my like one track mind, young mind person. And it really wasn't until we started dating that you opened my eyes to these things.
Yeah.
And to the fear of being pulled over by a cop. And it was shocking. I was, 22? 21?
21.
I was 21 and 22 when we first were dating. And yeah, that it was huge for me. So I think, as hard as it is for you to believe, because you've lived it, I've lived the other side. And
yeah,
I know that, some people are just aloof. They just don't see it.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm not giving a pass to anyone whose opportunity is now to listen.
Right.
That you brush it under the rug. Like, now is not the time
to say, well, I don't see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a lot of where, black people's frustration comes from, is that because to us, it is so obvious and so apparent that these things are happening. And so when I hear someone say like, wow, I had no idea, I'm definitely working on it, but it's been eye-opening for me to hear that from my friends who I know love me and support me. And so that's kind of opening my eyes to like, wow, maybe y'all just really didn't know. I don't know. Anyway, the question was, how do I reach out to my black friends? One, I think, is expressing the truth of, I didn't know and I didn't realize, and I'm sorry for that. And I'm sorry for, what you've been going through, or the fears that you've had that I'm, wasn't aware of, or that, I don't have to think about going out late at night. Anyway, just expressing those things, I think is a great first place. The second part is, asking questions. How do I say it? There's a good way and a bad way to ask questions. The good way would be, or the good type of question is asking someone about their experience and asking for their story. I think that is like, in that sense, you're asking for someone's first person experience, and really only they can give you that. Where I'm sure a lot of white people are uncomfortable is because they've heard black people say like, it's not my job to educate you. That's a different type of question. I'm really diplomatic in my approaches to things, and so when people ask me, I'm not very aggressive in
Yeah.
retorting back. Like, it's not my job to educate you. But understand that asking me the question of like, so what's wrong with America, or like what racist things are happening? It's like, well, you could just Google that. Like, I don't need to, like, I'm not a history professor, and I've done the research, or I've lived it. So sure, I know, but like, just Google it, or like watch a documentary or something,
Yeah.
celebrate Kwanzaa one year. I don't know. Yeah, there's a certain amount of work that you can do as an individual to research what is happening and what has happened, so that you don't have to ask. Because realize, like, if you're asking that question, a bunch of other people are also asking that question.
Yeah.
And then it just feels like, man, like, y'all just don't want to look this stuff up, or like, why do I have to tell you what happened? Like, just look it up.
Yeah.
I mean, that even sounds harsh for what I'm used to telling people, but I understand that there is a difference between a question that you could Google versus asking for someone's firsthand experience with something.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it comes from a better place when you are asking for someone's experience and like, can you please share your experience? I want to understand you. I want to understand your story versus like, so can you break down? Like, listen, there's a lot of activists out there whose job it is to like break things down for you and who are more than happy to say like, this is the reality. Here's the statistics. Here's how you can help.
Right.
And I think it is up to us white people, or I mean, I'm just saying white people, but it could be anyone who feels uneducated to look to find those people and to really do your homework, do your research. I think it's a different question when, like, I've had friends text us this week that are like, what do you and Jay think of this response? Or like, I'm getting called this after posting about Black Lives Matter. What should I do? Can you help me? I think that's a little bit different in terms of like, once people are acting, once people are doing their best and speaking out. Again, I'm just talking about mine and Jay's experience and his willingness to share.
Right. And I was going to explain that even after you're done, but yeah.
Yeah. I think there is a difference once people are really trying to act.
Yeah. And I mean, so Annie and I are obviously very vocal about this and aren't afraid to, speak about the issue and whatnot. If you notice that your Black friends aren't like talking about it publicly or really aren't saying too much, perhaps they are not the person to ask, hey, what should I say to my uncle that's telling me all lives matter, perhaps look to a different source in that sense, or to your friends who are more vocal about the issue.
Yes, definitely. I definitely don't want to put words into anyone's mouth, so that's not my intention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did that answer the question? Right? Was that the question? Like, how do you approach your Black friends about this?
Yeah, that was the question.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes my brain like keeps moving and I forget the question I was answering. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh.
Well, also for those at home, I'm literally juggling our baby.
Wow. Right on cue.
And I'm profusely sweating as I try to hold him.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. So yeah, I think you answered. Okay, next question. I can't support the movement because I haven't seen anyone proposing solutions to the problem of police brutality or racism.
Sure. Okay. Two takes there. One, and I guess at the beginning of this whole thing, this is kind of the take I was giving people, was that as citizens, our job isn't to come up with the solutions. Our job is to get our politicians and policymakers to focus on a specific issue, and then they come up with the solution. For example, when coronavirus came through and it was apparent that people were losing jobs and weren't going to have money, the federal government came up with a plan for a stimulus package. Like, they never asked us as the citizens, hey, what do you guys think we should do? Or what are your suggestions as to how we should do this? They just did it, right? Like, their attention was drawn to the problem, and then they addressed it in the way that they chose to address it. So all that to say, we as the citizens don't come up with the policies, right? That isn't our role. Our role is to vote on the elected officials who will then come up with the policies. So you don't need the policies right in front of you to say, or to write your elected officials and say, hey guys, police brutality is an issue, please address it. You don't have to wait and see what the policies are going to be in order to ask them to address something. Now, I do have ideas as to what those policies should be.
Jay is going to be a politician, so he's organized his campaign.
Absolutely. If you'd like to donate to my platform, it is called Venmo. I'm just kidding.
I think we made a joke about that last week. You guys, you don't have to Venmo us.
Oh, yeah, that's a joke. Anyway, I mean, I am going to make the absolute most I can out of this music and then hop into politics and take over. But
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It sounds stressful. Anyway, I definitely have ideas as to what policies should be. First one is a national database of fired police officers, those who have been fired for misconduct. Right now, there's nothing stopping you from being fired for choking out a black guy in Tucson, Arizona, and then moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and being hired there as a cop.
Yep.
Right? So there needs to be some sort of national database to keep track of officers who have been fired for misconduct. We do this with doctors already. So, and I think, but I may be wrong, that we do this with lawyers. Or they get disbarred. I don't think there's a database, but there has to be a database of which lawyers are barred. Yeah,
because I'm just going to stop talking because I don't know.
Okay, sure.
I mean, if I were to hypothesize, then yeah.
Yeah, because you have to have passed the bar and be accredited or whatever.
Yeah, and how do you know if someone's been disbarred?
Yeah, exactly. So we do that with lawyers. We do it with doctors for malpractice. So there's precedence for it to be done. And I think that we should absolutely do that with police officers. Second would be during the hiring process or at each department, there needs to be a division within HR or human resources that scrubs applicants or candidates for police work, scrubs their social media and online activity for red flags. So if you've already posted things that are white supremacist or white
racial
supremacist,
slurs,
slurs, right? Or homophobic things, right? Or sexism or anything that would make you violent. A bad candidate for being a police officer. Those things should be looked for and flagged during your candidacy. I believe that's the word. And then that division should continue to monitor social media and online activity for the officers for the time that they are employed by that department.
Yeah.
So it's not a one-time thing. It is, look, don't engage in any of that. And if you do, it's flagged, and then you lose your job kind of thing. Because, I mean, if you work anywhere else and you post something wild like that, you're going to get fired.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, so there needs to be some accountability there. Third thing would be, I think this would need to exist at the state level, but an independent committee or group, division, whatever you want to call it, review board that would review all police shootings and death by police. Right now, there is no checks and balances within police and work. It's all internal. If you've watched Law and Order, dun dun, everyone hates the guy from IA, Internal Affairs. But that's just it. It's internal affairs. There is no independent committee that is policing the police. In all other aspects of government, there are checks and balances, and that just doesn't exist here. So, and I say that would probably need to exist at the state level because you would want it far enough away from the police departments that we could reduce the amount of bias just by the fact that they would know each other. We're not going to get perfect at that, but I think also if you did it at the federal level, that's too much. I don't think the federal government would be able to do that for all the states. So anyway.
Love that idea.
Thanks. The next thing would be increased training, or the amount of time that it takes to become a police officer. Initially, my idea was requiring a 4-year degree, so a bachelor's degree, to become an officer. Someone brought up to me on Twitter that could disproportionately affect minorities that want to become officers, because less minorities graduate from college. And I was like, oh, that's a really good point.
That's thoughtful,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a good starting point, and perhaps there's room to kind of figure out exactly how to do that in the most meaningful way and the most helpful way. But anyway, my initial thought was, a 4-year degree. And within that degree, you would have to take classes in psychology, de-escalation, perhaps that would be more in your advanced training, criminology, implicit bias, those types of things.
Yeah.
In order to train to be a cop.
And I feel, in an ideal world, I think that we have been seeing some videos of really wonderful cops in the past few days. And it's like, let's find those people and make them trainers. Like, they can teach. I personally don't believe all cops are bad.
Right.
So let's find...
Just like not all Black Lives Matter supporters are looting and rioting. Let's get that straight.
Wow, louder for the people in the back of the podcast.
Not everyone is bad. Don't let a few ruin the whole thing.
Yes, great analogy. So I just think, let's find those ones that are already doing a great job. They already seem to have a good head on their shoulders, and they're keeping their cool in really high anxiety situations. Honestly, if you can't keep your cool in that situation, I'm concerned, because your whole job is high anxiety.
Yeah, you should not be a cop. Any job where you have to carry a gun and you're not good with pressure, like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, the staggering number for me that was like eye-opening. So in Utah, I think it takes 832 hours of training to become a police officer. It takes 1,000 hours of training to become a barber, and 1,600 hours of training to become a cosmetologist.
Yikes.
Yeah. So almost double the amount of training hours to become a cosmetologist in Utah than to become a cop who has seemingly unwielding power.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
How upset are the hairdressers going to be?
Yeah, right? Absolutely. So there needs to be some sort of increased training. Another one that was introduced to me this weekend was, so this one was not my idea, but making police brutality a federal crime.
Yes.
Right? So
there
also
should be no tolerance there.
Penalties there. Right.
No tolerance at all.
I haven't researched what the implications are of making something a federal crime, if it's more difficult to prove or but I do like where that's headed, of let's make the penalty harsher, because you're not just a normal citizen who killed somebody. You are someone who your job is to protect and serve. And so if you kill somebody, you should be held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
Last one was getting rid of, what is it called? Qualified immunity. So right now, this was another one that was brought to my attention this morning, actually. Right now, if a cop kills someone, the family cannot sue the police officer for wrongful death.
What?
Right. So let's say he gets acquitted. He can't be sued for wrongful death because he has what's called qualified immunity. The family's only source of recourse I think is the right word, would be to sue the police department as a whole. But in order to win that in a civil lawsuit, you have to prove that the police department either was negligent in their hiring of that officer or was negligent in their training of that officer, which is incredibly difficult to prove.
Yeah.
Incredibly difficult to prove. So people have talked
Say
about
that phrase again.
qualified immunity.
Everyone put that in your letters to your senators and your congressmen.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah, let's get rid of qualified immunity, because then officers know, like, hey, look, I could be sued for wrongful death if I kill someone unnecessarily.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How, if a doctor messes up a surgery, is that the same kind of idea, like you're suing the hospital?
So is that how that works right now? Is that you sue the hospital, you don't sue the doctor? Or you sue their practice? Or
see, this is where I need to stop bringing questions to people and just like look things up. But that is, I'm putting that into the ether of like, is that the same?
Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't looked
We'll
up.
have to look it up.
That idea was introduced to me this morning.
Well, I like that idea of getting rid of that because, so you're saying only if they get acquitted, they can't come back for a second lawsuit.
So I don't know. I believe that if you get charged criminally, that I don't think you can pursue also civil, like a civil lawsuit.
Oh.
But I may be completely wrong about that, though. But I do know that if you were acquitted, typically then, yes, the family would go for a civil lawsuit. I believe that's what happened with the OJ case, is that he was acquitted but then found guilty of wrongful death and had to pay the family.
Okay, I see. We have one last question. You ready?
Yes.
I don't know how to help. What can I be doing?
Oh, perfect. One, you can listen to this podcast and share it with all your friends and family. Little plug. No, in all seriousness, there are many, many different ways to help. You can write a letter, send an email, call the office of your local, state, and federal political leaders. Specifically, you want to call on them to dedicate time, energy, and resources towards solving the issue of police brutality. You can specifically ask that they consider the suggestions that I mentioned earlier, or if you have suggestions of your own, include those in there. You can research charities and organizations that are fighting the issue of police brutality. You can join those, or you can donate to those causes. Buying a shirt, a sticker, poster, publicly displaying that. That way you can, again, publicly display your disapproval of police brutality. This one, I think, is key. Withholding your vote from candidates running for public office that do not prioritize the issue of police brutality and racism. That one's going to be very important, especially coming up this June. We have a lot of primaries happening. So make sure to, withhold your vote from candidates who don't make this a priority. And then if you are the type that wants to protest and get out, peacefully join a protest or a demonstration and increase that public awareness of the issue, bring eyes to the issue. So yeah, those would be the things I would say to
those are awesome. And help. I think that you're including something that every person from all walks of life can do, like something for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't even have to be a quote unquote supporter of Black Lives Matter to do those things. You just have to be against police brutality and racism.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was great. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
I think this is the most I've ever talked in the podcast episode.
Yeah, but don't lie. You know that you love to talk.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love hearing my own voice. And yeah.
Well, thank you very much. You explained everything. Jay is, may I just say, such an eloquent speaker. He's so diplomatic. It's just this sounds so cheesy. It's just been a real pleasure to hear your side of things and
hear Ford's side of things.
Yeah, you know what? That's the other thing. I'm really sorry, you guys, that he's been squawking so much, but we have 2 kids now, which is twice the work to find a babysitter. And so Ford likes to be on the podcast.
Yeah, we should probably include him in the title, like featuring Ford Warren.
Yeah, and just so everyone is aware, he's not like choking or allergic to anything. He just figured out how to make dinosaur sounds pretty much, and it's his new favorite thing.
Yeah.
So he's in no danger.
Don't worry.
All right, well, we will post this, and I think if anyone has follow-up questions, feel free to DM us if you'd like us to create a part 2. We definitely want to be a resource for people and to help educate. So if you feel like your question wasn't answered, let us know. And answering it in this forum is a lot easier than answering a million DMs.
True.
So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for learning and expanding your knowledge and speaking up and fighting the good fight.
Follow us on Instagram at The Internet's Mom and Dad. Send us an email, theinternetsmomanddad@gmail.com. My name is Jay Warren.
My name is Annie Warren.
And I love you guys.
And that's Ford Warren. He loves you too. Okay, bye.